Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio number 22, The Beauty of Male Sexuality Revisited. I am your sexy host, Brian Martinez. I will be playing the part of the hetero guy. And we also have with us Anthony, who will be playing the part of the bisexual guy. So say hello, Anthony.
Hello.
And since we can't really get a real Milo, we have Mike playing the part of Milo, who will be playing the part of the gay guy.
Say We're hello. Talking about men now, darling.
And then we have some clams. We got Hannah. Hello, Hannah.
Hello.
We have Anna, the cherry.
Hello.
And we have Allison.
Hello.
Okay, and now I'm going to hand my microphone over to Allison so she can say a few things.
Okay, so... Oh, yeah, I got it. I actually, just before we go, I love how you were so dismissive. You know, we got the straight guy, we got the gay guy, we got the bisexual guy, and we got a bunch of clams. Moving on. That was awesome. Okay, so...
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So... For those of you who don't know, we've been having a bit of a dust-up in Gamergate-related matters. There's been a supposed expose of infiltrators into Gamergate who are trying to shut the hashtag down. My part in this is I was contacted by one of the people who was asking individuals involved in Gamergate what they thought about shutting the hashtag down. His name was Paolo, and he contacted me on Tuesday, and we spoke for about 16 minutes, and he asked my opinion. I told him first off that I didn't think it was possible, and second of all that I couldn't only speak for myself, and that personally I would continue to be pro-Gamergate and use the hashtag. I then explained my reasoning, and I apparently touched Paolo, and he later tweeted that I had embodied the quote-unquote Gamergate identity. Now, I think that Paolo is being really sweet, but it's still a little silly to say that one person embodies Gamergate. However, I'd like to speak to the Gamergate identity and what I think Paolo was getting at and what I'm getting at. And this is just the opinion of one person, that's it. Gamergate is, of course, as it started, about ethics and journalism. But journalists have a narrative, and it's a narrative that they use to silence critics. The first step to the goal of enforcing ethics in journalism is to be able to stand against the narrative. Now, when I put the Gamergate logo on the flag and Calgary Expo in order to thank the Gamergaters who helped us get there, I didn't think that the trouble that happened would be quite as severe as it ended up being. However, I felt that it was necessary to stand for people who were being unfairly maligned by the narrative being woven by journalists, because I'd seen it before with the men's rights community as well. After we had been evicted, I remember, and this was sort of a limbo moment between knowing that we were going to be forced out because the security had come over and said, "You got 50 minutes, get the fuck out." And they didn't use the swear words, but it sort of was in their body language. And actually being able to disassemble the booth and get out. Now, the booth was fairly complicated. It took about 3 to 5 hours to set up, and we only had 15 minutes to disassemble it. And I didn't know where my husband was. I didn't know where my car was. We had no tools, and they had taken my badge away. So I was walking across the convention floor, and then walking out the parking lot, not knowing how I was going to accomplish this task. And I remember standing as I was walking in this empty parking lot. I asked myself, is it worth it to stand for what you believe in if you know, or if you are vilified as essentially the devil in the process? And I was, like I said, it was just this moment of silence in the parking lot, and I was thinking this thought. And I said, yes, it is. What Gamergate is, in my opinion, not just ethics in journalism, it's the process of all of us coming to that moment in our empty parking lots where we ask ourselves, is it worth it to stand for what we believe is right, even if the whole world vilifies us? And it is a process, because sometimes we start off having the narrative blasted at us, and all we can do is look up. And then maybe we get up to a crouching position, still standing against, or still trying to move against the narrative. And then we manage to stand, and then we manage to walk, and then we manage to run. And in my opinion, Gamergate is that process. So everybody who is part of Gamergate has stood against the narrative, stood against being seen as a devil, and stood for what they felt was right. And again, it is a process. It's every moment that you have to face that, and you face it alone. I don't think it was a coincidence that it was when I was alone in the parking lot that this question occurred to me, because these moments are faced alone. And every moment that you say yes, you are doing Gamergate. It's not an identity, it's a process, it's an action. And I think that everybody listening to this is part of that. And I think that's what Paolo was getting at. And it certainly was what I was trying to say. So thank you for walking beside me and saying yes when you were asking yourself, should I stand for what's right, even if it means I get seen as the villain? Okay. There you go, Brian.
All right.
Don't believe in the devil. Don't worship the devil. Be the devil.
Oh, but Gamergate does have a leader. I am the leader of Gamergate.
Of course you are, Brian. Or maybe our foe, Milo. I was gonna say Milo, but it's like my mispronunciation problem is getting really bad, so I won't.
I am the commandant of Gamergate.
No, I am the Fuhrer of Gamergate. Oh, come on,
I am
Hannah.
the czar.
Hannah,
Czar.
Hannah, you're the empress of Gamergate, Hannah. I know it. Don't hold out on it.
Oh no, Queen Butthurt of Gamergate.
We know that Mike is the queen of Gamergate.
My name's Milo.
That's right.
You've been to more meetups than me, Hannah, but I've had more bomb threats, darling. So we get 100 points for a bomb threat.
I'm gonna start calling you Myclo from now on.
Myclo, that's good. Oh, that's a mispronunciation with a purpose. Unlike mine, is just spewing spaghetti everywhere.
It's fun spaghetti. Silly string.
Oh, yes, but silly string is slightly awful, like slightly horrible. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fun. When you
It's about as bad as being raped.
Yeah, silly string.
You son of a bitch! But are you PC, bro? So,
all right.
The story
Now
stuff.
we're rambling.
Oh, I actually have some mailbag stuff. I thought we would.
Let's do that. Let's do that, bro.
Let's do it, bro. Yeah, let's do it. Do you PC? Come on. Do you, bro?
You PC, bro?
I PC, yeah. Definitely. Okay, especially when I'm drunk, but I'm never drunk, so I guess I never PC. So there's a call to action to support Gamergate-friendly websites, and I actually really appreciated this because it's much more of a positive thing to support people who are going out there and actually being putting Gamergate out there as a positive thing and not hiding from the narrative because it's frightening, and it's more like you're supporting the positive rather than punishing the negative, sending emails to advertisers to drop. So the shills, and again we shill pretty much everything here, but this in particular is what a list that's been presented as Gamergate friendly that's outside of the tag, and those are www.nichegamer.com. You can actually pretty much assume the www.com, gamesnosh.com, TechRaptor, Superplex Bros, and Operation Rainfall. So do give those some clicks, and give them some support the positive. Now, as to the topic of tonight's show, I think we were probably going to spend quite a bit of time talking about shaming male sexuality as a bad thing, of course. And as we go through the topics, and I have quite a few. I have MGTOW and grass eaters, sex bots, sex toys, impotence shaming, rape victim shaming, bisexuality, gay and straight shaming, so orientation shaming, that you'll notice there's sort of a pattern that goes on. There really isn't a sexual choice that a man can make that doesn't come with shame. And in fact, a man can even have his ability to choose sex, in other words, being raped and having his consent voided, and he will still be shamed. So there's almost no place where men can rest where they're not being shamed sexually. And even if they're raped, they're shamed for having, or not even for having been raped, but just shamed because they didn't enjoy it. All right, so how do you want to do this, Brian? Do you want to start with maybe the grass eaters, the MGTOW, and talk about that phenomenon?
Sure. Let's start with the grass eaters because that kind of like predated the MGTOW, right? Or
Yeah,
are these things got lumped together?
Yeah, I think maybe they got lumped together. You seem to. Are they coming after you, Brian?
Well, I do live in Chicago and I am brown, but no, not right now. At least they don't know where I'm at.
Okay, Jay, was that racist of me?
No, that was racist of me.
Oh, okay. JF sends this particular inquiry. In Japan, there's a non-organized movement of grass eater, or herbivore men, who are known for avoiding dating, socializing, or finding a significant other. There's clear similarities to the MGTOW movement in the West. There's many interesting facets of the movement, especially in relation to entertainment, anime, video games, Japanese idols, etc. Herbivore men don't seem to hate women, but rather like fantasizing about them. The honey badgers are probably well aware of these aspects of modern masculinity, and I think it would make a great discussion for the show. I'd love to hear the perspective on things like waifus, men who decide to focus on enjoying their life alone rather than building it with someone else, and enjoying life that way. I think this is very important, and in some ways unconscious social movement that stems from feminism, and I look forward to hearing what you all think. Thanks, from JF. So, who wants to spearhead the discussion, as it were?
For starters, I don't think it stems from feminism. I think it stems from the same thing feminism stems from, and further up the trunk, if you see what I mean.
Yes, I do. So
Yeah, if that's the case, then feminism is kind of the straw a bit that breaks the back. It's kind of the tipping point where it just becomes too onerous. It's not a cause. It's just the breaking point. That when that turns up, it just becomes not worth doing anymore. Participating in this sham, you suddenly say this is a sham, and I'm no longer pretend it's not a sham.
Well, Japan doesn't really have feminism, right?
They
So-
do have.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
In fact,
yes, they do.
they have such a problem with women on crowded trains, crowded subways or whatever, making accusations of groping and getting men into trouble, that there are now cars just for women to avoid that problem.
Yeah, and we're talking about it in Britain. While this new Labour chap was entertaining the idea. Not sure what's happened with that.
Yeah, also in Japan, they have an even stronger amount of women complaining about office culture and off-color jokes and humor between men in the workplace, to the point where their workplaces are very similar to what our workplaces have become, very rigidly structured human rights kingdoms. So human resources kingdoms, rather, where human resource people just sort of rule the roost and prevent people from even doing their job. And yeah, it's not limited to the West. It's also gotten particularly bad in Japan. So there's that.
I think that what the grass eater movement is, I mean, it is very MGTOW-esque as Anna pointed out in the verbal chat. But it seems to be a response, from what I've learned, to almost to traditionalism, because the men there, they're expected to work themselves to death and work long hours to provide for their family, and the payoff doesn't seem to work out, at least in the eyes of these guys that are basically, the grass eaters. So they're not willing to sacrifice themselves, to basically do the whole wife and children and sort of expectation that the culture has for men, and the women don't really have any sympathy for them. So they basically find them sexually uninteresting, and they're not attracted to them because they're not doing that thing that they're expected to do. And so these guys end up retreating into their hobbies and watching anime and playing video games. And even I understand, like, they kind of like get into like, I don't want to say makeup, but I think they get into sort of like a metrosexual kind of grooming kind of thing too. So yeah, I mean, they're basically they've retreated inwards, away from traditionalism, away from women. They don't think that it's worth the juice is worth the squeeze, as it is said, and but it's almost not really a response to feminism, but like Mike said, something bigger, which I would almost say is traditionalism that comes from gynocentrism. And that's, I think, what they're running from. And also, they might have a point. And the fact that there really isn't any sympathy for them, not only from women, but also from the men who consider themselves the meat eaters, which are the guys that do go out and do work the jobs and do, sort of chase the money so that they can attract a woman, so they can start the family. The ridicule they get from both of those sides, it only really serves to justify what they're doing already. Allison.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I actually, you know what? I'm going to cede the floor to Hannah. Go ahead, Hannah. Uh-oh. Are you having troubles with the mute button?
It's mute button issue.
No, I threw the floor at you, so I can understand if you got quiet for a
Yeah,
minute.
it was so heavy that it stuck my mute button in place.
You almost kill you, I think.
Yes, right in the process, Just see how violent we honey badgers are.
Uh-huh.
But no, as far as differences and similarities between the two groups, just the little bit of experience that I've had with Japanese culture, and it's been a very little bit, I noticed some very distinct similarities between East and West, and that was that in both cultures, women have been struggling to get out of the requirements and restrictions that were standard for the traditional female gender role, but at the same time, they've had this expectation that men would adhere to their requirements and their restrictions, and both sexes had sort of sets of benefits and drawbacks to their gender role. So I mean, women had the benefit of being exempt from certain things that men were subjected to. For the most part, women were exempt from the hardest jobs, the hardest aspects of life, the roughest aspects of life. And I mean, even though poor women still worked a great deal harder than, say, middle class and wealthy women, there were still always levels of work that men would do that women were not put into or not expected to do. And there are other aspects of life, aspects of social violence and things that women were exempt from. But in return from that, and having our sensibilities coddled, so all the years of women being able to command a level of respect for those sensibilities, being able to demand that people censor themselves around them, and being able to expect not to be exposed to the rougher edges of not just human communication, but just social behavior in general. All of those things came with the expectation that to earn them, you had to be a lady. You had to display a superiority in your morality, and you had to you had to live by that standard. You couldn't just have that judgment of other people. You had to be a more moral person. And women enforced that on each other. It's where slut shaming really comes from. It's not something that comes from men. It's something that comes from women insisting on that. And it allowed women to sort of command not just a respect, but a sense of value for our sexuality. Like we were considered worth something sexually, and so we were able to barter that as a means of social, obtaining social status and obtaining even financial status. Whereas men were more subject to the rougher edges of society, the rougher aspects of life, but they had a little more freedom to not be so morally strict. And each side had a trade-off there. For me, I think men kind of got the short end of the stick in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, the most prominent was that their lives were shortened by the conditions that they faced. Many of them were shortened, their lives shortened by things like war and dangerous jobs. Before there was a lot of structure, at least government structure, involved in making workplaces safer. And what's happened now over the last 100 years or so is that women have become exempt from those rules, that expectation of moral superiority, the expectation of a standard of accountability and a standard of behavior, but they're still expecting the benefits. They don't want to be a lady, but they want to be treated like a lady. And we still have women demanding that society enforce that. And feminists are demanding that society enforce that. They're demanding it in the name of all women. And men are still stuck in the past. They're still stuck in that role where they have all the expectations that have always been placed upon men, but they don't have the same rewards that used to go along with meeting those expectations. So it's become very, very polarized. And I think in both countries that there is that segment of men. I think that is what inspires men to go their own way, is that they're no longer part of a partnership. There's no longer a trade-off where for fulfilling the role you have, you're given a part to play, and for fulfilling that part, you have a societal reward, and that being that you are respected, that your humanity is respected, and that you have, you obtain a role in a relationship, and you become cared for by somebody. And it's just the fact that those are no longer connected to each other, that our relationships and our roles in society are no longer connected to the expectations that we have to meet. And in particular, men no longer have any reward at all for meeting the expectations that they're expected to meet. In fact, all they have is punishment if they don't. I think that's what drives men to just simply say, okay, we have no partnership. Why should we have anything to do with you? You've become exactly the opposite of what society was built on. Here we have the worst aspects of traditionalism left over. And I wouldn't want any part of it if I was a man. I wouldn't want to get married. I wouldn't want to date women. I wouldn't want to even get involved in them, especially given the risk that entails today. Especially, being faced with false accusations, being faced with the potential for years and years and years of forced support for a woman's life choices because she decided she wanted to be a single custodial mom instead of choosing to use birth control or choosing adoption or choosing safe haven abandonment, or choosing abortion. She decided to be a single custodial mom, and suddenly the guy's responsible. Why on earth would any guy look at that situation and say, man, I want to be a part of this? why would he trust? Why would he be attracted to that? It actually makes more sense for men to go their own way right now than it does for them to not. So, I mean, I'm not surprised by this at all. And I think it's fairly similar in both East and West, because it can be traced back in both East and West to women being freed from their expectations but still having the rewards that were associated with them, and men being trapped in their expectations and having none of the rewards that were associated with them.
All right, Anna, go ahead. Oh, I think she's dealing with the mute button. Well, one of the things that I wanted to point out is I think a lot of this also stems with the idea of desire. I think men don't just want a role or a function; they want to be desired by women.
I just had a really, really tiny quick point. I mean, I love what Hannah was saying, and she's absolutely correct in that women have had this expectation placed on each other of being ladylike because they wanted to kind of shut down male sexuality in a certain way. They were making female access to female goodies as something that you had to jump through a lot of hoops and be the right kind of man and do the right social things to do. So there was definitely a short end of the stick for the men, but a drawback and a reward for women doing that. And the expectation of being ladylike is extremely important if you're going to demand to be treated like not a human being, I guess, that you can just procreate with. Like men and women, it seems like we're on a different class level in that sense. Like I know men were also expected to be gentlemanly, but there wasn't that big of a restriction placed on their sexuality. And from there, we move on to now women being frustrated by the fact that there's a double standard, that men who have a lot of sex are right studs, and women who have a lot of sex are sluts, and all of that stuff, and they're upset about it, except they don't remember their own history of the fact that women were expected to act ladylike and to have the benefits of that, and now they've completely dropped that pretense of being ladylike and want to be human beings and more equal to men in terms of sexuality, but they still want the extra treatment of being treated special and like they are a snowflake. And that's the crucial part. They don't realize that they've given up being ladylike, which means kind and bright and warm and nice, and they've let go of all of that, but they still want the rewards of it. So, but ultimately, the whole thing still has to do with denying male sexuality in the whole ladylike thing. So I think that's something that's important to bring out, that the culture at the time was very much denying male sexuality.
All right, Mike Lowe.
Okay. I count my blessings every day that I'm sort of a hermit by nature. So I could never recall a time that I wanted to be a husband and a father. I've always sort of enjoyed my own company and shit. So, like, if there's anyone I do this for, it's not for the people like me. It's the men who want to be husbands and fathers. I've no idea where they're coming from, but it's very obvious to me that if anyone's society is getting fucked over, it's the men who want to be husbands and fathers, because they're led at every step and given no option at every step and shamed at every step. And it seems bizarre that we're naming the movements of the guys who aren't doing that. We're naming the grass eaters and we're naming the MGTOW. Why is no one naming the movement of men who tried to be husbands and fathers and are now fucking homeless or whatever? You know, because that's how the system works. You can't name them because they're invisible because of the system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess you could call them fathers' rights activists, but I don't know if that's a movement so much.
they haven't been named so much by themselves. They haven't talked about themselves as much, as aside from calling themselves fathers' rights activists, and many of them are involved in activism. But society's name for when your wife kicks you out to be with another man or for any other reason, and then quits her job, and you just don't have the ability to support 2 households on one job, then they call you a deadbeat dad. Especially if it happens in the middle of a recession and you lose your job and can't get another one. She quits her job, but you're the deadbeat.
You pointed out the invisibility of these things. Sometimes these things are invisible precisely because we're so used to having them that it's actually something we ignore when we don't, because it's sort of like a fundamental terror that something's supposed to be there and it's not, so we just go on pretending that it's there. That if we just imagine, like talking about men wanting to be fathers and husbands, to be honest, I think that a lot of society runs on the expectation that every man wants to do this and will do anything to do it. So when you're confronted with a large group of people who don't, and a lot of people who just give up, we just kind of keep going as if nothing bad is really happening.
I also want to point out, because it was just on last night, the Republicans had their debate last night. And the majority of those candidates, one of the first things that they did when budget discussion was part of it, when that budget discussion came up, was they started talking about, oh, child support needs to be increased. We need to come down on deadbeat dads. We need to squeeze those dads harder. It was like they have this complete, absolute disconnect with the real world and actually what's happening between men and women when they divorce and what's happening to the men after the divorce. These politicians have no idea what goes on in the real world at the other end of the legislation that they talk about passing. So
recently, one of Australia's former prime ministers died, Malcolm Fraser, and he pointed out one of the fundamental problems with politics in the world in general before he died, and it's that you don't get politicians anymore, you get managerial professionals. When you say they don't know what goes on in the real world, you couldn't be more right, because you're talking about people who go straight to university, learn politics out of textbooks from hundreds of years ago, then go straight into politics and have no contact with the real world. So when they say they need to come down harder on deadbeat dads, that they just heard that, and their idea of a dad is themselves someone who makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and is married to someone who probably already had money. So, yeah, these people don't live in the real world. Your politicians do not live in the real world.
Now, Derek in chat just pointed out they do know one thing they're doing. They are pandering to women, and that is true, because that was the other thing I noticed about this debate, was that all of the men, the one woman that was on that stage was silent during most of this, but all of the men on that stage fell over each other pandering to women. They fell over each other making promises. I respect women. I'm going to do this for women. I'm going to do that for women. Not one of them really talked about what they were going to do for men.
Isn't that a surprise in the so-called patriarchy?
Yeah.
Not one of them really talk about what they're doing, full stop, but okay.
Okay, let's move on to another conversation, how men actually get shamed.
Well, Brian said he had something short to say.
No, he said to move on. So, not just men that get shamed for not wanting to have a relationship with women, like the grass eaters or the MGTOWs, but also men who get shamed for wanting to have, enjoy a sex toy, or, for example, a sex bot, which would be essentially a sex toy. It would be a vibrator in the shape of a human being. And we've already are getting a pushback against the very idea. And Jorn from Sweden offers the following message. So this happened. I've linked 2 news articles below that you might find entertaining. Both articles are on the same subject. You might have already read these by the time I send this, but I thought I'd send them just in case. The future is here. And the first one is on the NBCnews.com site. Campaign launched against harmful sex robots, and Washington Post, having sex with robots is really, really bad. Campaign against sex robots says. And I know that Hannah, or actually Rachel, wrote up a bit of a reading on this new horrible threat to womankind. Sex bots and men, potential robosexual men. So,
are you ready for me to read the thing?
I think so.
All right. Feminists call for a ban on sex bots. A company called True Companion is releasing the world's first sex robot this year. They are promising a partner that is always turned on and ready to talk or play. There are two models, a male and a female, named Roxy and Rocky, respectively. So, as you can imagine, feminists are furious and are choosing only to focus on the female model. In fact, they are demanding that the people manufacturing these robotic females reconsider doing so, as it might be harmful to women, feeling that it will lead to traditional stereotypes of women and the view that a relationship need be nothing more than physical. However, the people at True Companion maintain that they aren't trying to replace human companions, but instead offer help to those between relationships and those who have lost spouses. They hope that one day Roxy and Rocky will be self-learning and be able to learn their owner's likes and dislikes. So now I have to wonder, these feminists that have this objection to these sex bots on the basis that they believe it'll lead to traditional stereotypes of women and the view that a relationship need be nothing more than physical. Are they going to get rid of their penis-shaped dildos?
I don't think so, Hannah. All signs point to no.
It seems doubtful.
Yes, I'm shaking my what is it called, the special magic 8-ball.
Yeah.
All I'm getting is
mystical 7-ball.
all mystical 8-ball. What do you think? Yes, go ahead, Jerry. We're waiting for you to actually talk.
Oh, awesome! I wasn't sure if Hannah was done or not. But yeah, I love the fact that the argument is already presented in that article, that the only concern. Whoa, that was the only concern they have with women choosing sex bot partners is that it might disrupt relationships or replace men, which I think is a great argument. But you're not seeing snickering and like basically making fun of people and demoting them, not demoting, I don't know what the word is, but looking down on them for using sex toys. And if you look at any media outlet, YouTube videos, like TV shows, there's this idea of men being disgusting and pathetic if they use sex toys, and the idea that women are empowered and independent if they use sex toys. And that's something I'd like to talk about and bring out and hear you guys' opinions on, because there's a very strong shift of what is acceptable for women to do with sex toys, and then how unacceptable it is to make fun of women using sex toys because of the progressive feminist pro-sex efforts. But we don't really have anything like that for men all that much, and even things like fleshlights that mimic porn stars, lady parts, they encourage their fans to like those, and there seems to be a good community around that a little bit. But in any kind of mainstream media, TV shows, anything really, it's very acceptable to make fun of men and consider them pathetic and unable to get laid if they use sex toys. But that same idea is not given to the female gender using sex toys. So I'd just like you guys to talk about that a little bit.
Well, the first thing to point out is that the corollary is that men are also considered pathetic and stupid and weak if they also pursue women for sex. So saying that men are considered pathetic for using sex toys is a fortiori true, because they're considered pathetic in terms of sexuality. The whole point that Alison made earlier rings true, that there's no way they're not considered pathetic and failures. I mean, the ideal man is God, some sort of sexless sky demon. So it's kind of, even people imagining you have a sex life is in itself pathetic. So yeah, it's just part of a larger problem, Anna.
Well, one of the big problems is that the reason these women are upset, and it's that they probably don't even consciously realize that they're doing this, but they object to men using any kind of sex toys because it infringes on a woman's exploitable monopoly on men's access to sexual pleasure. It is still all about using sex as a bartering tool. And being unable to use sex as a bartering tool because men can get it somewhere else is a threat. It's a big threat to them. It's a loss of women's sexual power. So they see these things basically the same way that they see sluts. And they'll treat them the same way they treat sluts, as a scab that is violating the strike that they use to demand better working conditions, better treatment, more respect. This is basically the same age-old argument. You can't enjoy yourself without my permission, because I have to be able to use your ability to enjoy yourself to position myself socially.
Yeah, well, I would not say that they're bartering necessarily for better treatment or other things. I think they're bartering for just control in a lot of cases. And it's unfortunate because I think it actually this system really ruins sexuality for both men and women.
Well, I think they see control as better treatment. I think they see running things as their rightful place.
Yeah, well, the problem with better treatment is that they will come back and say, well, why should we have to appeal to men with our sexuality to get better treatment? Well, the answer to that is because otherwise you would have to actually do the work. And the work is, if you look at the statistics, the work that men do is highly dangerous. And it shaves years off their lives. They're the majority of the workplace deaths. So yeah, if the choice is between using your sexuality to get a better treatment, a better living situation, or using your body and letting your health slowly erode in the process, a lot of people prefer to use their bodies, and I assume men would be part of that too, if they could. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
So this is the same reasoning that I see, that these people go after other things that basically bring men sexual pleasure that isn't sex with a partner that they've courted and gotten to know and all of that. So if they go to porn, prostitution, just slutty one night stands, dirty magazines, even R-rated films that have nudity in them, whatever it is that men can just spend money on to get sexual release in some way, always comes under attack by these people, and this is just another in that long line of attacks on the stuff that makes men sexually satisfied. And I agree with what you guys are saying, in that it's because women want, or these women, they want to control the market. They want to monopolize men's sexual pleasure by basically being the gatekeepers. And I'm reminded in a way, and I could be wrong, so this is just a question I'm going to pose, but if feminism is, as Karen described it once, female nature politicized and given and basically allowed to run amok without any breaks, and it's basically just, it is the nature just put on a massive scale where there are no controls in place. And we know that in the animal kingdom, the female usually controls the market on whether or not a male gets to mate with her. Could this be an extension of that same mentality, but it's just going out to all men everywhere as a way of basically controlling which men get to not only reproduce, but just to even know what sex is, basically to control them in every regard, if that's just that completely off the rails and totally insane. I don't know. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Well, what species are you talking about? Because in nature, that do that.
Well, in nature, right? In nature, animals only get laid if they basically prove themselves worthy of the female, if she approves. In most cases, in the animal kingdom, right?
In most cases, what are you talking about? Every case I can think of is cases in the mammalian kingdom of female animals mauling each other to death for the attention of a male. That is much more common.
Well,
not to mention macaques who use, and bonobos who use sex as a way that humans do, in a sense of when there's a social wrong been done to somebody, the bonobos will, if one female knocked another female off the branch, she'll apologize by rubbing her genitals on the other one's shoulder or something. So they actually use sexual exchange as a way of refunding or paying for social faux pas and social gains. So I mean, humans do a lot of that.
I think I know what Anthony is talking about. I don't know about all mammals, or going so far as to say that females will maul each other. I don't know the specific science behind that. But
Um,
I will
I
say
was
that.
thinking, I was thinking specifically of lionesses. There have been instances of lionesses killing each other.
Okay, fair enough.
But isn't that to get like the 1% super prime premier alpha male, like the one?
Well, how it works, Brian, is there's sort of a calculus going on. It's not really a black and white situation. At least the new science that's coming out of biology seems to be introducing some complexity. And what I've seen is that, oh God, Hannah, lionesses are just catty. Yes, okay. So- okay, well, what I've seen coming out of new studies into female mammalian sexuality is that what's really happening is, first of all, there's usually a percentage of males who just don't give a shit and opt out, period. And then you have a situation where you have quite a few females going into heat all at the same time, and usually they're competing over the best males. Now, having said that, the males themselves are competing for the best females. So there's sort of a mutual competition going on. But the absolute limit on sexual resources is actually male sperm. And this is something that I've argued for years on. A male animal during any day of a female animal's reproductive cycle only has so many effective ejaculations. What I mean by effective ejaculations is ejaculations that could have a reasonable chance of leading to conception. So each male has, I don't know, probably 2 to 3 shots, and each female can mate as many times as she wants and only gains each time in terms of sperm reproduction. So what you have is a situation where you got the top males are trying to compete for the top females who are also least mated. So they're trying to compete for females who haven't mated with anyone else. And the females are trying to compete with each other for the first matings of the top males so that they know that they're going to get the best sperm. And then after that, they will fuck every other male in their species. That's their win condition. Have sex with the best quality male who hasn't had sex with any other female, and then have sex with as many males as possible to increase sperm competition. And that's the behavior that they're seeing in at least one species of antelope in the desert or in like the savannah. And what it and what yeah, the Topi antelope. And what biologists are saying is that the biological factors with the Topi antelope suggest that this is not something that would be specific to them. That it's more likely that this is generalizable to mammals as a whole. So what we're looking at is more of a mutual competition situation. Females.
That's brilliant. Sorry, just real quick, you brought up something really, really important that can actually dissect that dichotomy of stud versus slut, because it feels like the female has to be least reproduced in order for the male to be able to ensure that it is his sperm that gets passed on into the child, while women actually select for men that have had multiple sex partners, in the sense that they are pre-selected by other women, which means other women want them, therefore their genes are valuable, and also that they were able to copulate and be chosen by so many women. In fact, there have been studies done with rats that they are able to smell STDs on each other, and a female would of course avoid a male who has STD smell on him. But if he has a smell of STD and other females on him, she will still reproduce with him regardless of the STD. So there is this mutual selection that is happening based on extremely long standing instincts. And a lot of times us humans, we don't realize that some of our feelings have to do with instincts and not with what we conceive of as this great highbrow humanity thing.
Well, actually, if you look at the what's going on with the Topi antelope in a tournament mating situation, there is a prioritization for females. The prioritization is for males who have not mated, because again, you're looking at a limited resource in sperm, so they don't want to. And this is a big difference between pair bonding mammals and tournament mammals. A female mammal wants to get also wants to get the least mated male because she will get the best ejaculation. The first one will be the best, and then the preceding ones will have fewer and fewer sperm. These females want to get pregnant, and they want to get pregnant with the best possible situation. So they go after as high-ranking a male as they can do the social jockeying to find who's had the fewest copulations. The best would be none. And that's a tournament species because you're looking at a very short period of time where the female's got to get in, they got to get their sperm, and then they get out. And they don't have to rely on the male to actually take care of them afterwards. It's sort of a different set of instincts. But in that context, the female instinct would be to go after an unmated male, and this is what they do. They go after unmated males, and they even try to deceive unmated males who are high-ranking, who are actually choosing a better female. They'll try to insert themselves between the female and the male, so that it's sort of like almost like you don't really regard rape in the animal kingdom, but it's sort of like a forced trying to take away his choice. That he doesn't get to choose the female that he would choose. Instead, he has to choose this female who's probably had more copulations or is lower status. And status for females is generally indicative of whether or not their offspring will survive. So for the males, they are looking for good status females and also less mated. But in both cases, they are. So that's a tournament species. Now with pair bonding species, you're looking at a situation where the male has to contribute significant amounts of resources or the child dies. And then that's a different set of instincts. But I think this is like, we're almost up on the hour here.
Well, the reason, I mean, I'm glad, all this is really useful stuff though, but going back to what we were originally talking about, my question is then, with all of that we've just said about, these R versus K reproductive strategies and, the stuff involved with male sexuality, and how would this relate to the politicized feminism, like in terms of, I think that there might be something there in terms of like what inspires these women in feminism and men, which are to want to control other men's sexuality, and what is sort of behind that, by trying to take away men's enjoyment. Is it because these things compete with them, these fleshlights and robots and stuff?
If men prioritize getting women who are least mated, then they're going to prioritize things like mate guarding, which kind of explains a lot of male feminists' need to terrorize women into avoiding every other man they see. If you look at a male feminist, the first thing they'll do to a woman who disagrees with them is terrorize them into not disagreeing and being wary of every man but them. That's really what they do. So yeah, if they have a residual instinct for to have women to mate guard, then yeah, they're going to act like that's the first thing that came to mind.
Are we still talking about sex robots?
I don't think we are.
We were originally, though, weren't we? This is what we got. We should petition someone to ban dildos. Take the biggest manufacturer of dildos out there, write an angry letter demanding they ban dildos for the same reason this other group wants to ban sex robots. And then we wait for the cries of Puritan and sexist and whatnot. Then we rig those communication lines up, do a quick switcheroo so the pro-dildo people are arguing against the anti-sex robot people, and wait until they tire each other out.
Yeah.
Will that work?
And maybe they'll end up fucking.
Well, probably not, because
they can close both of their businesses down.
Yeah, well, no, because if they end up fucking, they'll just be fucking themselves because they're the same people, really.
Yeah, it all leads probably to like Kraft, BP, or Monsanto.
All right, let's move on. Let's do the next thing. Let's do it. Okay, Hannah, can you let's read the one with the guy who was mounted by the woman in the middle of a parking lot.
Oh, the one unconscious.
Yeah, let's go into like
roll down to that.
Oh, before we do that, by the way, if you're a man, go out and buy yourself a sex toy and enjoy it, and don't feel ashamed. There you go.
Or go
And-
buy a prostitute, and don't be ashamed.
No.
Oh, is it time to plug my website yet? Is that what we're doing?
Just start
Yes,
with the
plug your website real quick.
Go to
And-
annacherry.com
Yes.
and get a
do the
sex toy.
and promise yourself that you will enjoy it.
All right, and I will go ahead and read here. Yes, Virginia, there is a double standard. What do you call it when a person, sober or drunk, gets caught having sex with a partner whose intoxication has led to incapacitation? When the unconscious person is a woman and the conscious person is a man, feminists say it's always rape. Nothing brings that assertion home better than the feminist media blitz over a 2012 Steubenville, Ohio story involving high school kids who got drunk at a party and engaged in sex acts which involved boys, in which the involved boys continued after the involved girl became incapacitated. The story became public when pictures and video from the party circulated online, embarrassing the girl, sparking controversy across the web, and eventually leading to an investigation, criminal charges, conviction, and incarceration of the boys. The feminist response to the story and later reporting on it produced, by example, a set of guidelines on the appropriate perception of and response to drunk sex. Number 1. Sex with an incapacitated partner is always rape, you predatory shitlord. Number 2, if the incapacitated partner is imbibed the intoxicant voluntarily, see Rule 1, you predatory victim-blaming shitlord. Rule 3, if the incapacitated partner consented prior to incapacitation, see Rule 1, you predatory consent misunderstanding victim-blaming shitlord. Number 4, sex with an incapacitated partner is violent because it is always rape, you brutal predatory consent misunderstanding victim-blaming shitlord. Rule 5. If there were no physical injuries and no force, coercion, or deception were used, see Rules 4, 3, 2, and if those aren't enough, 1. You brutal predatory consent misunderstanding victim-blaming rape culture perpetuating shitlord. Rule 6. Having sex with an incapacitated person makes the individual a monster whose loss of humanity justifies an intensity of hatred unparalleled in nature. In fact, the guilty party can never again be spoken about in human terms, and to do so is a cardinal sin against the gods of feminism. Anyone found to be speaking about these monsters in human terms must be soundly condemned in order to purge the shared consciousness of feminist society of the taint of victim blaming, even if the victim isn't mentioned in the discussion. You brutal, ignorant, predatory, consent misunderstanding, victim blaming, rape culture perpetuating shitlord. Rule 7. If there are any extenuating circumstances which might elicit sympathy for the accused, see Rules 6 through 1, you brutal, ignorant, predatory, consent misunderstanding, victim-blaming, rape culture perpetuating, rape apologist shitlord. Rule 8. There are no exceptions to these rules of reaction, you brutal, ignorant, predatory, consent misunderstanding, victim-blaming, rape culture perpetuating, rape apologist shitlords, except when the incapacitated person is male and the conscious partner is female. This is a story of Kimberly Jackson, the Virginia woman caught having sex with her unconscious boyfriend in the parking lot of a busy East Virginia Beach Boulevard shopping area during mid-afternoon. Video and still images of the incident circulated online following Miss Jackson's arrest. Not for rape or even something so innocuous as public indecency, but for mere public drunkenness. Reports on the incident include statements blaming her actions on intoxication, which apparently makes her unaccountable for her actions. Forget the outrage. Forget condemnation. Feel free to laugh at the situation and the individuals involved, and be sure to poke fun at the incapacitated man's inability to perform while unconscious. Because, what the hell? Standards for consent don't apply when a woman is having sex with a dude. News coverage has attributed consent, and by extension responsibility, to the first drunk then unconscious partner, without anything like the backlash received by reporters who dared to even discuss the circumstances of the Steubenville case. What has been the response of the femosphere? A sensational chorus of silence. After all, what would they have to say? Did you think equality between the genders extends to cover sex acts? Surely we cannot expect them to hold a woman to the same standards for accountability and conduct as we do men. You brutal, ignorant, predatory, consent misunderstanding, victim blaming, rape culture perpetuating, rape apologist, misogynistic shitlords. Discuss.
Okay. All right. I'd like to point out that there isn't actually a precedent set in Canadian law where a woman, after she got a divorce from her husband, charged him with rape because during a unconscious sex play. So what happened is she consented to having sex play while she was unconscious. So I believe it was some sort of choke fetish. And she consented to the sex, but he inserted a dildo into her ass. And because she hadn't specifically consented to that, she later reported that it was rape. Or something like she had, because, and what the court found was because she was unconscious. Not because he inserted the dildo, but because she was unconscious. It was rape. So in a situation where a woman even consents beforehand to unconscious sex play, in Canada, she can't. It's rape. So by our law, this guy was raped. Full stop. But apparently, like Hannah very, 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 very thoroughly pointed out, the same law does not apply to men, male victims as applies to female victims.
Well, with that Canadian law, it kind of reveals that in Canada, women don't have the right to consent to anything, really. Their consent is decided by the state. That the community decides when you can consent to anything. If you can't consent with your partner to, that's bizarre. That could explain why there are might be a lot of pissed off Canadian women that the whole full citizenship thing is total bullshit.
Now I want to point something out here. That is actually the feminist definition of consent. That a woman's consent is decided by a consensus, not by the woman, unless it suits the consensus. And by that I mean feminists define rape in such a way that if a woman thinks she was raped, she was raped. But they do not extend her the same courtesy if she thinks she was not raped. And I would also point out, I don't want to do the same thing to this man in this case. I am not calling him a rape victim. He said he consented before the act started, and he is not upset about it. So he is not, by his standards, and by my standards, he's not a rape victim. If he had not consented, and he had, said no, or not had the opportunity to say anything, and he was upset about it later, then he'd be a rape victim. But feminists do not give the individual the opportunity to make that decision for themselves. They have decided that regardless of your own perception, of your own experience, if they define a sex act as rape, you don't get to decide that you are not a victim. They decide that for you. And if you're a man, they actually decide it in the opposite direction. They will deny you your experience if you say you have been raped by a woman. And that's actually codified into, not law specifically, but it is codified into public policy in the United States. The CDC uses a definition that excludes being forced to penetrate in their National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. And they've done that based on the methodology created by the researcher Mary Koss, who pretty much invented the feminist theory of rape culture. Not entirely invented, but it's based on her statistics, her research, which inflates the incidence of rape by defining sex acts that the involved parties that they consider victims do not consider rape as rape, and then hides male reporting of it by defining rape to exclude sex acts that would be heterosexual sex acts between where the man was being victimized by their standards of victimization.
All right. So, do we want to move on to the next news item?
Well, I do want to hear what Hyper Chicken had to say.
Okay.
I was just going to. Actually, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
Okay, let's call on Mike.
Yeah,
Oh my
I
God.
I haven't thought of anything. I haven't written anything down. Go somewhere else.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll go.
Unjust.
Well, I will say one more thing. If this man had been victimized, if he had come out and said that he was traumatized by this, that he didn't want it, if she hadn't been his partner, or if he'd been humiliated and wanted to separate because of it, or anything like that, there would be people who would come out and gay shame him. There would be people who would come out and make fun of him for not wanting it. You know, whether they gay shamed him or not, they would disparage his masculinity, and there would be much, much less objection from the feminist camp to those behaviors than there would be if the sexes were reversed and it was a woman who was in that position. They would come out to defend her, but not necessarily a man in the same circumstance. And then they would talk about how, you know, MRAs were not standing up for him after multiple MRAs wrote stories talking about the situation, and much discussion had ensued.
Yes, this conversation hasn't happened. You know, if you're listening to this now, you now have like a 15-minute blank in your memory. Because we don't discuss these things or try to bring attention to them. We just, I don't know. I guess we're like mumbling like the people, like the adults on the Peanuts cartoons.
Mumbler!
Oh, I thought you were whining about not getting laid. I thought there was something about that, or.
Oh yeah, and we're also whining about not getting laid. Let's do some of that. No. Wah, 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 wah. I'm not getting laid. Wah, 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 wah. Well, not at this moment.
Man Boobs will now quote mine that moment out of the entire show. Nothing else in the show happened, but Allison said she wasn't getting laid, and that's gonna, you know, he's gonna be like, that she meant that seriously, and I'm gonna write a whole article about it because it's the most important thing said in this entire show.
Well, it's most important to me, but anyway, let's move on to the next topic since Mike is staring in terror at me.
Darling.
You don't know that. It was just a lucky guess.
Okay, Hannah, cue it up.
Okay, this one's such a short story that I keep scrolling past it. This is what I get for having everything in the world open on my screen here. There we go. Middle school boy. Yeah. I only have like 15 tabs open right now. That's not that much. Middle school boy faces assault charges for kiss. A 13-year-old Pikesville, Maryland boy is facing second-degree assault charges after teachers called police on him for kissing a 14-year-old girl. The incident, referred to in news reports as an unwanted kiss, occurred at Pikesville Middle School on Wednesday, September 9th, allegedly in response to a dare. The story, which has gone viral and led to some controversy over whether the educator's response was inappropriate, includes a report that no one was injured. The involved 8th graders were quite fortunate that they had not graduated to high school level kissing and the danger of badly pulled muscles. That's the entire story. So basically, middle schoolers did what middle schoolers do. Some kids dared a boy to kiss a girl, and he did, and she was not happy about it. And the teachers, instead of mentoring the students and teaching them not to do stupid stuff like that, went way overboard and called the cops.
All right. Well, I'm sure that one kiss, I mean, she's going to probably need therapy for the rest of her life, and she might as well become a nun now because, you know, she'll never be able to look at or touch another man sexually. Or I guess she should become a lesbian or she should, start a war against the Roman Empire. I don't know what is the usual thing for women to do when they're raped.
Well, what she should not do is become a feminist.
Well, she probably will. I mean, look, think about it. One peck on the lips. I mean, that's a lifetime's worth of trauma right there. How could you ever get over it?
She needs to file for kissing disability because her tongue wrestling career is over.
Yeah.
Seriously, yeah, the boy's behavior was inappropriate. And I'll be honest. I had some. I wouldn't even deign to call it sexual harassment because it was basically just boys being obnoxious when I was in junior high, and they were obnoxious for the whole year. And part of it was because I was like all sheltered and crap and responded with the appropriate, scandalized attitude and everything to it. And it's the idea that this should be treated with that dramatic of a response is actually damaging to both sexes. When I was in junior high, I've told this story before, but it's been a long time. When I was in junior high, there was a group of boys that followed me around during our lunch break. We didn't have recess by that time anymore, but after lunch, you'd go outside and hang around until it was time to go back to class. And they just followed me around, followed the leader style, mocking everything I did for 10 minutes or something. And I was upset by it because I didn't think and didn't respond the way I would respond today. Back then, I could have stood on one foot, picked up my leg, and swung my knee over my shoulder, and none of them could have imitated me, and that would have ended it. Or anything like that. I turn around and pick my nose at them, and then they would have had to sat there and pick their noses too. And it was just stupid schoolyard crap. But I went in and I talked to the principal about it, and he made this huge big deal about it. Instead of just, asking that it be stopped, he started this massive investigation and called all the boys in and treated it as this big sexual harassment incident, and I ended up sort of withdrawing my complaint because my intent was not to get them in big trouble. My intent was to put a little muscle behind my request that they stop doing that. And it obviously taught me that you don't go to the authorities when there's a little problem because the authorities can't recognize when a problem is little. So you just hide that stuff and deal with it yourself. And that's probably what this girl just learned too. That now, if she actually is genuinely sexually harassed, if somebody does something to her repeatedly, if somebody, says inappropriate things to her repeatedly that she's not prepared to deal with yet because she's still a kid, or if she has to deal with somebody much older than her bothering her, anything like that, she's going to either, there'll be one of two responses. She's either going to get hysterical because the adults have taught her that hysteria is the appropriate response for this, or she's going to not report when she should report because she'll be afraid that there will be a disproportionate response to the situation. And there will not be there won't be a middle ground. And if I had gone in when the principal that was there before the principal I reported to was my uncle, if I had gone in and told my uncle what I went in and told the principal that was there when I was in junior high, he would have said, well, what are you going to do about it? Why are you telling me? This is a conflict between you guys and you and the boys. I know you better than this. You can deal with this. But instead, I got coddled, and that is the absolute wrong response when a girl is experiencing something that is not a big deal. When you treat it as a big deal, then you take away her tools for handling when something is.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these issues seem to, that there's a double side to them. On the one hand, it hurts men, but on the other hand, it also hurts women to a degree, in different ways. So, what is interesting to me is how we have come to the point where we think a boy's lips are this toxic and capable of causing this much distortion to a woman, to a girl. Now, this is not just a problem with shaming male sexuality. It's also, if you turn male sexuality into something so toxic, it can only be, even consensual expressions have to be constrained. Well, I guess this is not. Even sort of almost these kind of minimal. Yes, a kiss can be traumatic if it's part of an ongoing form of abuse. Okay, I think it's you, Mike. You're the one who's droning. What the hell? All right, Mike, I'm not exactly sure what happened to you, but your audio spaghetti was everywhere. All right. So, I mean, you have to believe that male sexuality is so very toxic and causes such harm to women. But then that removes women's ability to enjoy their heterosexuality in a lot of ways. And it hurts women because they really can't have that kind of a free sexual expression when they think what they're actually doing is rolling around in nuclear radiation every time they have sex with a man. That his body somehow taints them and destroys an aspect of their femininity. And that's really part of this whole problem, is that we do think that male sexuality destroys an aspect of femininity because we have this incredible association between so-called innocence and femininity and virginity and chastity with femininity and not being defiled with femininity. So it leaves women in a lot of cases in sort of a double bind that they solve with rape fantasies. And I don't have, like, I'm not trying to shame people who have rape fantasies, is fine, but you also want to look at it and ask yourself, especially in those situations where they won't admit to the fact that they have rape fantasies and they just want to have them and inflict them on the rest of the world, and and not actually acknowledge or not acknowledge and take responsibility for the fantasies that they have. And you can see this with people who bring it up constantly. Like, this is what they think about 24/7 rape, and they don't ever let it go. They don't ever just stop, and it's like their entire life is defined by it. And I realized after I thought about it that rape is the one time in this this conception, and it's not just feminist, it's this traditional conception of women being defiled by men. How can you ever, as a woman, really desire something that's supposed to destroy you, destroy your identity as a woman, as feminine? Because that's how we see it. We see male sexuality as defiling and degrading women. How can you desire something that defiles and degrades you? The only place where you can actually enjoy sexuality, the only time and place, is almost during rape, when the entire necessity of your desire, of your consent, is removed, because it's a choice between consenting to the sex and losing yourself as a woman, as feminine. And that whole construct is sickening. Anyway, Anna, if you want to speak directly to that.
I do, yeah. We're just talking about this, actually. I happen to know quite a few friends who, a lot of them are in the adult industry, but even those who are not, I just recently talked to a journalist, actually, that she expressed similar feelings. That a lot of women have the sort of almost non-erotic rape fantasies that Karen was talking about. And specifically, it seems to be a absolving of guilt and intent. So it's basically allowing the woman to remain innocent, and basically innocent of the sexual act, because the whole thing is forced upon her. So she's not responsible. She can feel innocent and guiltless in a certain way about engaging in the dirty animalistic sexual act because it was forced on her, instead of actively going out and choosing it and therefore bearing responsibility. So it's just a way to absolve of responsibility that is sexual, and to those women that absolvation is sexual and erotic, and they just kind of want to be pushed into it and forced and not be responsible for it. Yeah.
having said that, rape fantasies are also very common among men. And what I mean by that is men fantasize about being raped, too. I think a lot of guys have a little bit of a trouble. This is me poking at guys, but you have a little bit of trouble differentiating fantasy from reality when it comes to rape. But yeah, the men also have rape fantasies too. So go ahead, Hannah.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say about the story itself is that this kind of approach to situations like this teaches a lesson that feminists have tried to impose on women for years, and that is this perception of masculinity or men and boys as being larger than life, and femininity or women and girls as being small and weak and in need of protection. And by that I mean this girl is expected to be disproportionately traumatized by a mere kiss. She's also expected to not be able to handle the situation at all. Like she's not told in this situation, all right, that was an asshole move on his part, and we're going to tell him not to do it again. And if you get subjected to this, you have the right to say, don't do that. These are my boundaries, respect them. And the big problem with that is that it hurts both girls' ability to establish and enforce their boundaries and guys' ability to find their path to relating to girls. If girls cannot set boundaries and girls cannot enforce their boundaries, how are guys supposed to know what to do? How are they supposed to know what aspects of their relationship are functional and productive, and what they need to let go by the wayside and not pursue? You know, how are they supposed to know what is appropriate behavior and what is inappropriate behavior if nobody in the relationship can talk about it? If they can't, you know, they can't ask and they can't be told, because if they ask, that's an imposition. And if they expect the girl to tell, that's an imposition. You know, so here we have this situation where there's the perfect opportunity for a girl to set a boundary and say, you know, maybe you should have known this already, but you can't just walk up and kiss me like that without asking, without talking about it first. And instead, they've taught her to do exactly what feminists complain that women do, to freeze up and not do anything about it herself. And it's the same situation with the story I told from my junior high days. You know, I should have been told to man up, basically, and get out there and confront my bullies, which is what my parents taught me at home. And I, you know, at that point, I really should have, if I hadn't been in a school setting, I would have known exactly what to do. If I'd been at the park down the street from my house, I'd have known exactly what to do. But because I was in a more social setting, a more structured social setting, I reacted differently. I could have had, it was a perfect opportunity for an adult to teach me, you know, that I could take those lessons from the park to that structured social setting and stand up for myself. And instead, I was taught that there should be a disproportionate response and that an authority would stand up for me, and all I had to do was cry about it, you know, or whine about it or whatever. These lessons are what is destroying the ability of men and women to make relationships. These lessons that girls are small and weak and helpless and unable to parse circumstances involving boys, that girls are unable to navigate these social situations without help, and unable to stand up for themselves and enforce their boundaries. These are the lessons that are preventing men and women as adults from being able to relate to each other in a way that allows them to develop genuine intimacy. And this bullshit needs to stop.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you mentioned that men have the fantasies about being raped too, right? And I think that that's true. I think that I mean, speaking as a man myself, men, if they do, and I think that it's what it is at its core is that men have fantasies about being desired to the point that a woman cannot essentially control herself, and she just takes him. Like, that is something that I think a lot of men do actually have, do fantasize about. And I think that that is also the reverse is also true. I remember Karen was telling the story about you know, the kind of man that, you know, wants to just tear your clothes off right on the spot and just have you right there, and that's really attractive. And I think it's attractive to both sexes. It's just that the way that we, you know, the way that things are right now, that sort of thing is not some fantasy that men are even, you know, expected to have. And so I think that it's good that you brought that up. But I agree. I have it myself sometimes.
Well, it's well, you shouldn't feel bad about that. I think I understand. I don't actually have rape fantasies, so I apologize if I sound like an asshole when I talk about them, because it's not something that I really relate to. I mean, like but to have, I can sort of understand the appeal. Maybe a little. Maybe I'm just too much of a control freak. And that's not to say that, you know, compromise, you know, like, that's fine, but I just can't really get into being forced into doing something. However, like I said, I could sort of understand the appeal. And so maybe the situation with guy, and like I said, don't feel nobody should feel ashamed for that. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that it seems like an opposite situation, because did I have a sex positive upbringing? So I had sort of a weird upbringing, a little fucked up in some ways. So I don't know if I want to go there. But when guys have this rape fantasy, they seem to have the fantasy about being ultra desirable. With women, it almost seems like they can let go of the need of expressing desire or consent in
Right.
order to get sex. So it's interesting. But
yeah, sometimes men want to feel like, I don't want to say worshipped, but like they're just, they want to be taken care of. They want to just fall, you know, they want to just have a woman just want to, like, just take them, you know, and that they don't have to, they can finally stop being the aggressor, or stop being the guy who, you know, is always sort of like taking charge or taking point or taking the risks.
Yeah, or taking the responsibility for their partner's sexual enjoyment. And like I said, I could see that. And apparently, according to the study, twice as many men enjoyed a rape fantasy as women, although the rape fantasy was somewhat consensual.
Well, you think about it, and under what other circumstance can a man have sex with a woman without being considered the person responsible for the outcome for both parties in the encounter? When is he not responsible for both his own pleasure and hers? When else?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is that in terms of benefit towards men in this, and this is also, it's a double-sided sword. Men get a lot more. I think male sexual fantasies or male rape fantasies, they're allowed to sort of indulge them in a lot more publicly and openly and with a lot less shame. But that's the double side to that, because you always go on the news articles about some guy being raped by a woman. Even if it's brutal, you will find the comments of the guys with the rape fantasies in the comment section, fapping to it, and it's like they just throw it out there. But if you're a woman who has a rape fantasy and you go to a comment, go to an article on a woman who's being raped, and you say something like "lucky girl," and I'm fapping to this right now, of course you'll have the feminist armada sailing in to blow
Actually,
your ass off.
I remember seeing that on Reddit. There was one of those off your chest posts where a girl talked about her experiences of having been raped, actually by another girl when they were kids. and somebody posted in there that this was their sexual fantasy and they were fapping to it, and they got mobbed, and then their comments were deleted. And it was because it was a girl's experience. It was just everybody just called the commenter a monster for even thinking about it like that. They didn't even ask whether it was a male or female commenter. They didn't, whether they were fantasizing about being the raped or the rapist or anything like that. The person hadn't even clarified any of that. They just got it roundly condemned and deleted.
Which isn't really healthy in and of itself. We should treat male sexuality, like male rape victims, much more respectfully, but at the same time, people should have a right to their fantasies. Maybe on an article about an actual rape victim, probably not the best place to start.
No.
To start going in, and like I said, guys are particularly prone to this because I think they have a really rosy view of rape when they're the victim, and it's like, yeah,
well, they have a really rosy view of rape when another guy is the victim.
Yes, you're right. You're exactly right.
Totally different, and even the ones that sort of try to deny that it is what it is, that the ones that have been through a traumatic experience and then try to man up because they're expected to, even in that case, they really don't have a rosy view of it. They are simply dealing with society's baggage that society has dumped on men. But I wanted to clarify one other thing in this discussion, and this is it's not exactly a sore point for me, but it's an important point for me, and it's been so since I was in college and we had to do an assignment discussing, I think it was Margaret Atwood had written a short story called Rape Fantasies, in which she basically made fun of the idea of rape fantasies by having the protagonist have these ridiculous fantasies where the rapist shows up and she's in bed with a cold and he has a cold and they sit in the bed together with Kleenexes and chicken soup instead of a rape actually taking place. People who have fantasies that would get labeled rape fantasies don't want to be raped. They are fantasizing about situations where they can let go. And it is not the same as saying that somebody is having a rape fantasy is not the same as saying that somebody wants to be raped. It is a very, very rare thing for somebody to actually want to go through with that fantasy, and even more rare for somebody who would to exist who would go along with it if it just spontaneously happened to them without them planning it ahead. And when people do go through the fantasy like that, they set up all kinds of safety nets the same way that you would do with any other fetish behavior that is hard to establish consent, or it's hard to establish gentle intimacy in the midst of it. You have safe words, you have signals, you have whatever you need in order to say this needs to stop because I'm no longer comfortable with it. And it's not something that people just do. It's not something that people just want. And it's not shameful to talk about the fantasy, and it is not an endorsement of rape talking about the fantasy. It is merely a discussion of the nuances of people's psyches and how they approach pretty much the baggage that society has dumped on us related to both male and female sexuality.
Okay. And with that, I'm going to close the floor on this particular topic, and I'm going to go to the shaming of every single possible orientation that a man could have. Like bisexual shaming, gay shaming, straight shaming. No matter what, we got you covered, right? I mean, no matter what you choose, you're wrong. Anyway, hey Badgers, this is another letter that we received from Jesse S. Hey Badgers, I want to first say keep up the good work with the recent explosion of sexuality-related topics, as well as the awesome work in the men's rights movement, related issues, and your willingness to talk with feminists. Now on the topic I want to see you discuss. This is a topic that has personal importance to me because I am a bisexual Canadian white male, 19 years of age, who generally finds more of an emotional and sexual interest in women, but still is sexually attracted to men. I was raised in a fairly close-knit family with an aunt who was a lesbian and was married years ago when Canada legalized gay marriage, and we have been involved in lesbian, gay, bi, and trans issues and have been around homosexual people enough to have learned that they are human and to take them in stride. But when I made the discovery I was not completely heterosexual, but rather bisexual, I had no issues coming to grips with my sexuality, as the idea of not being straight was perfectly normal to me. I have found that the best way to handle being bisexual is not to advertise it, but also not to hide it. I work on you didn't ask policy, which means if I asked, I will admit to it, but otherwise won't mention it unless it comes up. In most cases, due to a natural preference for women, most people assume I'm straight, but I do not identify as straight if outright asked. The reason for this policy of not advertising it is I have found as a bisexual man, a lot of women seem to view that as a sign of weakness, presumably because I am willing to have sexual activity with a man, which is viewed as feminine, therefore not masculine, and therefore weak, or possibly the queen bitch mode activates and they just want to be the dominant bitch in the female pecking order that they have now decided I belong to. But I find a lot of guys are taken aback by this for a period of time and then often act awkward for a time since they get this weird idea I want to sleep with them, until they just realize that just because I'm attracted to some men, I'm not attracted to all. And the idea of me wanting to sleep with all men is as ridiculous as a man wanting to sleep with all women. In the end, most eventually accept it, and it becomes almost forgotten. Those who do not accept it are usually not the kind of person I find worth interacting with beyond necessity. The discussion I want to get into, however, is related to how I am perceived by women, which is often two extremes. Total outrage, it's either total acceptance of the fact or total outrage and disrespect. The former is the desired result for me, which often never extends beyond a few curiosity questions such as, would you sleep with insert random man? And nothing in our relationship changes. The latter is naturally undesired and not tolerated, as many women think it's a free pass to beat on me verbally, emotionally, or even physically, which usually ends in me defending myself accordingly, which naturally leads to more outrage, until these women remember I don't tolerate bullshit from anyone regardless of who they are, which most people who know me know full well anyways. And I typically no longer have anything to do with these women going forward. I also find that gay men do not like me simply because I'm not on one side or the other, or think I'm in denial and won't admit that I'm gay to myself, when in reality I'm just a bit of a slut who has dirty thoughts about anyone I find attractive, and I'm not limited by gender. This leads to the most vicious interactions, as gay people tend to be very malicious when angered. I have even had them tell me it's impossible for this to be a possibility because it's unnatural to be attracted to both genders. I enjoy dealing with that one because it lets me sadistically tear their mind apart by forcing them to admit themselves their own hypocrisy, which many of these types of people simply are not capable of handling mentally, leading to a very broken shell of a person. Unfortunately for them, I'm a bit of a gamer, and to me victory is everything, and absolute victory is something that I will mercilessly strive for. Okay. You're a dark soul, friend. What upsets me most is I do not see this issue for bisexual women. For women, it's perfectly socially okay to be bisexual, and for men, it's socially frowned upon and often used as an excuse to be disrespectful and treat us as a subhuman. Why is it that only half of the population is allowed to be bisexual while the other half is not? This doesn't make logical sense to me, even with the galactic Olympic level mental gymnastics that makes the idea of the sky being pink and everyone being sexist if one bird flew a million years ago and said it was blue seem logical. How is it that something that is bilinear by nature could be so unilinear in society? Thank you for reading my message, and I hope to see more quality content from you. With all the hetero and homo love, Jesse. All right.
Very briefly, actually, bisexual women go through a lot of the same things that he complained about in his message. One thing I didn't hear you mention, and maybe I missed it, but lesbian women, some, not all, but some lesbian women also, if they're not busy shaming bisexual women or claiming that bisexual women aren't real because bisexuality can't exist and all that stuff, they'll decide that bisexuality just makes a woman a sex toy, and to be honest, it can get particularly harrowing in a group of women where there are several lesbians around, because you can't accuse one woman in a group of sexually inappropriate behavior without creating a huge drama. And well, women, particularly the rainbow community, they don't want to really acknowledge sexual predation among women, and they especially don't want to acknowledge lesbian sexual predation. So there's this, it becomes invisible, and it becomes a lot easier to do. But there's this, I don't know, there's this cruel level of abuse that takes place because of that. And if you look at statistics, I'm going to cite the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. For all of its flaws, it did get one thing right. The highest percentage of violence in relationships was against bisexual women, because they get it from both sides. So
Brian.
that's it.
Brian. Oh, wait, sorry, Anthony. Go ahead, Anthony.
Well, I wanted to say firstly, he's got the approach right to just say so if someone asks, but if they don't ask, don't bother bringing it up. And he sort of asked why gay men get really down, and also lesbians get really down on. This is kind of a foundational problem with the gay rights movement. Back in the 60s, they kind of took the passive route of it's not a choice, it's who they are, it's natural, and it kind of meant that there was a huge amount of othering that became sort of built into it. So in short, you're getting the othering from both directions, that they both want you to be in their camp and sort of prove their idea that it's natural and it's normal, and at the same time kind of angry that you won't. It's kind of a dividing up. They want divide and. I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but
it's like being in two different tribes. It's quite tribal. It's like using two different currencies, like and everyone else isn't aware that you're actually allowed to use two different currencies, like paying for your milk with dollars and your bread with fucking euros or something. You can't do that. Yeah, I can. I actually can do that.
Yeah, that seems to be what's happened, is that it's kind of the activist elite is usually what referred to as the gay men, who are really big into hating on bisexual men because they're really big on building up not just numbers but an image of gay men as socially positive, socially and kind of socially conservative, and pillars of communities. And so with bisexual men, they kind of don't know what to do and end up just well, if you can slut shame anyone, they get the slut shaming. Bisexual men we all get the slut shaming.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that I think he's also mentioning women's response, and I noticed that there is a statistics that indicate that a woman has far less tolerance for a man being bisexual than a man has for a woman being bisexual. So there's that element that gay men sort of don't really want to associate with bisexuals, and also, well, bisexual men, and also that women would prefer not to be with a bisexual man.
Well, there's also a behavior among straight girls where they will treat their gay friend as like their pet gay guy that they can, hug on and snuggle on and hang out with and be girls with, and you can't necessarily do all that the things with a bisexual guy that you could with a gay guy. You can't treat a bisexual guy the same as you would a gay guy because you might turn him on, and so they can't treat him like the emotional Kleenex that they treat their gay buddy as, and it's so they get offended. They might not.
Yeah, they can. By the way.
Well, you can treat any guy that way and get away with it, but you can't expect him to not get turned on. You can shame him for it when he does, but you can't have the full expectation that it'll never happen. There is a level of I guess they treat gay men as a safe space.
Yeah,
I don't
but
know if that's the best way to put that. The other thing I wanted to say is, which I put in our little chat, many activists at the gay end, the 6 end of the Kinsey scale, treat people in the middle as a delegitimizing force. Like if there can be bisexuality, that means that being totally gay must be incorrect. It's a fallacy. It's a rhetorical fallacy, a failure in logic, but they still act as though that's the case.
right.
Yeah. Well, and it's sort of it's an unpleasant situation. I think for apparently one of our patrons is sending me statistics that for approximately 25% of bisexual men and 30% of bisexual women live in poverty, in contrast to 20% and 23% of gay men and lesbians, respectively. And bisexuals also report much more negative interactions in their workplace due to biphobia. Almost 60% of bisexual people reported that they have heard biphobic jokes or comments in their workplace, making it a hostile work environment. According to the report, 52% of the lesbian, gay, bi population identifies bisexual. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for the statistics, but yeah, it's a sort of an unfortunate situation. I particularly find aggravating just the. I mean, in communities that are supposedly supposed to be sex positive, you see this kind of sort of distaste and dislike for men. There's still this almost obsessive worship of female sexuality, and it turns me off, frankly. Anyway, this is one of the reasons why personally I don't really go very far with my own bisexuality, just because it feels so. It just feels uncomfortable because of this stigma against male bisexuals. For me to explore something that is more acceptable to society, it just doesn't seem fair. Plus, I'm also married and monogamously so there's no real wiggle room there. But aside from that, it just, sorry, bros.
PC, bro.
Yeah. Well, sorry, bye, bros. I feel for you. I have the feels.
That's fine. Thanks. Thank you.
For what it's worth.
I wanted to also comment on that whole gay best friend that girls often have, so they can like dump all their emotional baggage onto and use them for all of the emotional and physical sort of comfort that they might need without having to worry about putting straight men in an awkward position, which they will do anyway. But I think that something that I notice is with friends that I've had that are gay and classmates and stuff is they really don't like that either, but they feel like they feel like there isn't much that they can do because they like being friends with these people, but they feel like they're being used, and not only in that way, but there's also this weird like tokenism that comes out of having a gay friend, like that people will be able to say, well, my gay friend, and they'll like bring it up in conversation, and I think it makes these women, I think they call them mops, feel like they are more socially conscious and more progressive because they have gay friends and they get to bring them with them, and they can start using sort of like language that some gays might find offensive, but they use it around them because of their friends. It's weird, but I mean it's something that I've seen, and it's almost like these kind of women feel as though they can use these men in this way, and gay men can't. They don't feel as though anyway. I mean, I think they can, but they don't feel as though they can just say, fuck off. I'm not your token gay friend or whatever. I'm not going to help you pick out purses at the mall. I'm not going to take you to the hair salon. I'm not going to do the things that your straight male friends don't want to do with you just because I happen to be a gay man. And you see it a lot, like also in like television media, like especially now you'll see like shows that are maybe like sitcoms or dramas, and there's always a if there's female leads, there's inevitably a gay friend, and he's not just a gay friend. He's like a really flamboyant, scarf wearing, glitter having, colored mohawk, really like over the top gay friend. That's that, and I wonder if gay men are annoyed by that. They don't like that, and they should be able to speak up about that. Okay, I'm done.
What's really bad is that stereotype is so prevalent and so prominent that people always seem to be shocked when a guy who doesn't suit it or fit it is gay. And they're, oh, you can't possibly be gay. You're so masculine. When in reality, like the vast majority of guys I've known who are gay are not effeminate at all. They just have a preference for other men. And it's that stereotype is actually really damaging because it among other things, it keeps people from relating to them. And it also forces expectations on them. It does all the things that stereotypes do. But it also delegitimizes, like I talked about, people at the 6 end of the Kinsey scale who are activists treating bisexuals as a delegitimizing force. People holding on to that stereotype and enforcing that stereotype really act as a delegitimizing force for gay men who are not effeminate.
Ironically, I'm sorry, Hannah. Ironically, it's an offensive stereotype, but it's actually considered like not only acceptable but a progressive one these days. Like that stereotype specifically is all over television.
Oh yeah,
it's
considered progressive because it fits in with the progressive feminist claim of rejecting stereotypical gender roles, gender stereotypes.
It's almost also as though it exists specifically to piss off like conservative types.
Oh
like,
yeah.
So like it's extreme so that like the Bible thumping right gets upset. Like that's the only reason why it's there, which is almost like, as some people in the chat have said, it's like a minstrel.
For Polar Bear 6, like the number 6, the scale goes from 1 to 6, 1 being straight, 6 being 100% gay. And then of course it's sort of a joke among the community. Calling yourself a Kinsey 7 is basically saying that you're off the scale gay, and that it's almost adopting the stereotype. But even adopting the stereotype doesn't really go so far as adopting a stereotype. I mean, it gets made fun of, and then it also gets adopted, it gets embraced, but it isn't limiting when the person himself has that personality. It's limiting when it becomes the expectation of society that if you're going to be gay, you must have that personality.
All right. So, do we want to discuss any other types of orientation shaming? Because this is mostly non-bisexuals. So
there's also a sort of spectrum of within bisexuality, and it ranges from asexual to pansexual. And like we said,
hold that thought.
Okay.
Hold the thought. I have a mail for this very occasion. I have it. Okay, just a sec. All right. Nope. Okay. No, I don't. I have it. Oh no, I do. Nope. No.
I don't know how much longer I can hold this thought, Nelson.
Well, you're doing pansexual sounds to me like being attracted to goat-legged gods with huge phalluses.
Yeah, that is a okay. Keep going, Mike. I'm sorry for jumping.
I'm
sorry for.
Turned on my kitchen implements.
I don't know what blocking you did, but
yeah, I'll carry on, shall I? Like I said earlier, like women can and will treat not only bisexual men but occasionally straight men as their emotional tampons, but they very rarely do it to oversexed men. Like if you're an all fuck anyone type bisexual man, then you tend to be, I would say, given that evil eye by anyone. But if you're just one of those guys who just seems like he doesn't have sex much, or if you're actually a virgin, then you can say, I guess I'm bisexual. And they'll go, oh, that's sweet. So, yeah, there's a range of different stigmas, and it also depends on how you come across generally, how creepy you are and whatnot.
Or how creepy you get treated.
Yeah, like generally, Doesn't necessarily mean that you are creepy. You're just treated as creepy because you're inconvenient, socially inconvenient.
Yeah.
We're
Creepy is often chick for socially inconvenient. You know,
okay.
and not actually scary, not actually threatening, not actually problematic, to use a feminist term, popularized term, just socially inconvenient.
Mm-hmm. Often. I mean, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I would
And
guess that.
actually,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's an aspect of shaming we should probably talk about too.
Creep shaming?
Yes.
Okay, well go straight into it then.
This is a thing that is not only a sickness among women, it's abusive. It's damaging to both sexes, just like the rest of this. But it's exponentially more damaging to men. Um, the treatment of a guy for just for the wrong of being socially inconvenient, and quite frequently because he's not attractive by the standards of the person who is creep shaming him. Um, it's not just an ego destroyer, it is actually a destroyer of the ability to interact socially with women. Because every time a guy gets hit with it takes away not just the confidence, but the faith in using communication tools that are normally used by people with each other. So if a guy approaches and says hello, or just makes ordinary conversation, but he's awkward, or he doesn't have the stereotypically handsome face, or he's not, I don't know, buff or whatever, or he just doesn't have the social status that the girl is particularly interested in, and she turns around and acts like he's predatory just for greeting her, then he's going to, over time, if this happens over and over again to a guy, he's going to develop a fear of just greeting women. Because every single time he does it, he's treated as if he's done something wrong. You eventually, when you get told that something that you're doing is committing a wrong against another person, over time, eventually you develop the mentality that you are wrong for doing that. That your choice to do that makes you a bad person. And when you take an ordinary, everyday thing that is part of being in a community, and you take a segment of that community and say, but you guys can't do this because if you do it, it's wrong and predatory, you're basically cutting those people off from the community and cutting them off from human contact. This is the type of thing that leads to suicides. This is not like, there's bullying, and then there is bullying. This is a level of bullying that is so subtle and yet so abusive, that it is potentially deadly, and it's isolating, ostracizing, and cruel in a way that most people don't understand, because most people aren't subject to it. At least most women aren't subject to it. So they get away with, in their own minds, they get away with in their own groups and everything. In fact, women encourage each other to do this. There's even websites dedicated to it, like Hollaback. But I don't know. It's just the idea that this kind of behavior can't get called out, that this kind of behavior is not only encouraged but has been encouraged for a long time. This is one of the sicknesses in our society that is leading basically to a widespread male suicide. And it is something that deserves attention, and it is a wrong and an abuse that is normalized in our society. Feminists bitch a lot about abuses of women being normalized. Half the time, they are the things they are claiming as abuses. Their claims of abuse are an act of creep shaming.
Indeed. Okay. Let's get to the last question that I have on my sexuality mailbag, mail sack. Harry M. writes the following. Hi, Badgers. I've been listening since Karen spoke to Sargon of Akkad, and have been going through older podcasts, and I have a question about sexuality. What is pansexuality? I've been poking around and don't get how it's different to being bisexual. It doesn't help that I've only really seen it used in social justice warrior circles, so I don't get why it's a distinct sexuality. I got an answer of it's being attracted to the personality and not the body of the person. But then, isn't that a sexuality for what you like? I like women with curves, but that doesn't make me curvusexual. So what is it exactly?
I've actually recently had a different explanation for this given to me. I was told that you're bisexual if you prefer cisgendered people only, and that you're pansexual if you don't have a preference for cisgendered people, that you like both sexes and both genders, and it doesn't matter to you. I disagree. I don't think that that's a very good classification, and I don't think there needs to be a separate classification for people who have a preference for cisgendered people versus people who don't. In fact, I think it's kind of silly, especially if you're bisexual. It doesn't really matter whether a person's gender identity matches their biological sex. If you like both biological sexes, and you like both genders, well, why would you have to differentiate? But that is how it was explained to me.
Well, I think I sort of stumbled on it earlier, sort of pretty much by accident. Like, asexual people technically are equally attracted to both genders, and pansexual people are the opposite of asexual. They're not just attracted to both genders; they're very attracted to both genders. But I pulled that out of my ass. You might do.
Yeah, it is a silly classification. Personally, as someone who finds trans people very attractive, I think pansexuality is a stupid label, and I always have. It's sort of a resembling of a wider problem that there is now just 1,000 different classifications that have spawned out of places like Tumblr, and this is just one of them. It's just really becoming stupid.
All right. Now, okay, go ahead, Hannah.
Well, this is actually what Anthony's touched on. This is actually becoming a really big problem, because it seems like every week there is a new label for an aspect of sexuality that doesn't really need a label, and they're starting to turn these things into identities when they are simply aspects of an overall personality. Like, your identity is not, even bisexuality is not an identity. It's simply part of who you are. It's a part, not the whole. It would be like if I described myself as a leg, because I have one. I have two, But if I describe myself as in fact, now they're getting down to the point of describing themselves as a right thigh or a right quad, right thigh quad, because it's there. These are things that are just part of who you are. You don't necessarily have to make your entire identity about the fact that you include in your being attracted to both sexes that you are not transphobic. And there's even one to describe basically normal sexuality, the most prominent sexuality, being attracted to people sexually that you are romantically attracted to. That's the majority of people in the world.
Okay, but this is sort of wandered off the topic of shaming male sexuality. I think there may be an element of forcing these labels onto men almost as a defense mechanism to shaming male sexual expression. Because, if you develop a label, you can almost develop an identity around it and start to develop the ability to push back against social shaming by having this separate community and separate people who identify with you. But I really want to get it back on topic, Hannah.
I was going to say, I would actually go so far as to say this multiple labeling thing is more of a female behavior, and imposing it on men is really a way of cutting them out of sexual expression. because they can't express themselves in their own way. They're being forced into a situation where they cannot be taken seriously, cannot be accepted, and cannot be understood unless they adopt female expressions of sexuality and this obsessive compulsive labeling.
Yeah, well, and it's just even the. I mean, we really didn't have labels for straight and gay 150 years ago, but suddenly we decided we needed them when we developed psychology. So.
Well, there were lavender lads.
Yeah, I mean there was also the
bosom buddies.
There was, well, but that was more of a behavioral thing, not an identity or a psychological label. The only one I can think of is actually lesbianism used to be labeled in Roman during ancient Rome in the Tribades, and it was treated with incredible disgust. That they were quite repulsed by women having sex with other women. It was, yeah, clitorectomy was actually used as a cure for it. So this is something that's very, very current. This idea that are very, very modern. That this idea that we require men to label themselves sexually. It's very, if you think about it, it's very sort of livestock-esque. Like you have to have this particular brand.
It's entirely possible to describe your sexuality by actions. Like who have you had relations with in the past, and who can you imagine yourself having relations with in the future? It doesn't have to be pinned on who you're attracted to, but that's where they go to, because that's not based on any action. It's based entirely on an identity.
Yeah, and also, I mean, there are a lot of cultures who just don't. I mean, that's not really a concern. I don't know how to describe it. It's not that men are necessarily not straight or not gay, but they just don't think that's the dividing line to indicate some level of masculinity. They just, generally in those cultures, it's are you married? Do you have a son? If you are, you're fully masculine. If you don't, you're sort of, we're going to eye you a bit. But I wanted to get into the end here. And we've identified a lot of areas where male sexuality is shamed. A lot. When men turn away from relationships and they go their own way, as men going their own way, and grass eaters, they're shamed for being not men, for being less than men. They're shamed when they get sex toys. Which is an example of it is this recent push to make anti-sex bot laws before there even really are sex bots. They're shamed, of course, when they fail to perform properly, when they're flaccid, when other people think they should be erect. And that's one thing that we didn't really cover in much depth, but in my personal opinion, actually flaccidity, a man being flaccid, is an aspect of human sexuality that is almost unique to us because of the complexity of a male human's erection. It's a very, very complex thing. It is because it's vasocongestive. Most animals, most penises in other animal species, the erection is just a muscular contraction. That's why they have a penis bone. So it's sort of like doing a bicep curl for them. It's not very complex at all. With human males, their sexuality, their arousal, and their erection is tied to an entire system of endocrine and circulatory aspects, which is very deeply tied to their psychology. So this is something, the flaccidity of men is actually a uniquely human thing. And we don't actually celebrate that. We don't celebrate the fact that that is part of being human. The complexity of the male sexual response is part of being human, and part of that is flaccidity. We don't celebrate that. We don't even consider it, or ever even think about it, that actually could be something that you would want to think of as a positive rather than a negative. And then we went over how we shame male rape victims for not apparently withdrawing their consent when they should be eager and happy for receiving male or female sexuality and attention. And we went over all the various shaming of men's sexual orientations, bisexual shaming, gay shaming, and of course straight shaming, which is creep shaming is a subset of. And we could get more into the shaming of male sexuality, the male gaze, and all of that stuff. The fact that feminists have managed to create an academic arm of study that entirely revolves around proving that male sexuality is harmful to females, to women. That the act of a man desiring a woman is harmful to her via objectification. And whenever I read stuff on that, it always blows my fucking mind that that even exists. First of all, objectification is a psychological impairment that that certain people who have it are crippled by. So you are actually engaging in what you would term ableism, feminists, when you talk about objectification, because there are people who suffer from it. So you're essentially saying that as soon as a man desires a woman, suddenly, spontaneously, he drops into a wheelchair and becomes a paraplegic or loses his eyesight. So first of all, that doesn't make sense. But what you're really saying is he becomes some sort of demon that should be ostracized by polite society. So yeah, we can get into straight shaming some more, and we have on this show throughout almost every episode. We seem to get into it. But here, the show is supposed to be about the beauty of male sexuality. So I'm going to throw a question out to the panelists. Now that we've gone through so many ways that we shame male sexuality and make men feel small and insignificant for being sexual, why don't you guys knock your heads together and name a few ways that our society actually celebrates male sexuality or presents it as beautiful and desirable? Give us some examples of our society.
Graffiti of dicks. We're still allowed to put dicks all over things.
But is that a demonstration of male sexuality being desirable?
Not sexually, but there's a certain level of defiance there. It's become a symbol of defiance in a way, hasn't it? Yeah, it's not really celebrating the sexuality. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not celebrating the sexuality. It's celebrating some other aspect.
It's still used in advertising, and particularly in perfume ads. You'll see both male and female sexuality portrayed. Ads for women's makeup and women's perfume, various ones. Now, a lot of women's makeup ads just show beautiful women. But if you look at in women's magazines, particularly magazines that target women who are still of dating age, so not necessarily the housekeeping type and recipe type magazines, but the Cosmopolitan and Vogue and that type of magazine, when you look at the perfume ads, a lot of times they'll have a very dramatic style of photography that portray men and with women in romantic positions, in various levels of undress, and it's very sensual. And the ad itself, the imagery itself, is designed to bring out the sensuality of the male body. And that is one way that we do still celebrate male sexuality. We treat it as a desirable thing in the sale of products that women use to try to make themselves more attractive to men.
A surprising area that is related to that with advertising is advertising I found in sports periodicals, sports magazines, because a surprising number of those can be quite, well, erotic, which kind of surprised me for a while because they're generally targeted at other men, not at women. So it kind of threw me for a loop for a while. Why so many sports ads could have so many sexual overtones and show men in a positive sexual light.
Well, there's another one that's kind of interesting, is the sexualizing of fathers of new babies. And that's like one of the sexiest things you can find online or in magazines and stuff, is a picture of a shirtless man holding a baby and looking at the baby, because usually the expression on his face is always very gentle and compassionate and caring and loving when he's looking at the baby in the picture. And those pictures are portrayed, they're presented as not necessarily seductive, but very sexy.
Anything else?
Well, I think that to Hannah's point, men with babies is sexy to women, and also for some reason there's men with pets and men that are doing photography of men doing work, like firemen and construction workers and stuff, as long as they're, you know, kind of idealized. And the last thing is, well, romance novels, right? Some of them are written by men, but they use female pseudonyms because the belief is that if they had their real names, they might not sell as well. But the actual, like, you know, the literature itself, I guess literature might be a strong word to use for a romance novel, but it does have something that, you know, women really get into. So that's all I was able to really pick out.
And there's always music. The music industry
Right.
is quite ready to celebrate male sexuality, and not, you know, for like poppy boy bands and whatnot, because they are pretty much just dolled up to look like a female power fantasy, to be honest. But I go back to good old metal, where you can be any kind of man and have your sexuality celebrated, whether you're a big hairy sweaty guy doing metal, or you're a skinny sort of goth guy doing that shit. There's a place for you in metal, you know.
I mean, like the guy from Motorhead, is it Lemmy? He's like one of the ugliest dudes I've ever seen, but he probably got lots and lots.
He's ugly, but he's still sexy. That's the point.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. Because I mean, there's something about bass players. There's something about music. There's something about it. It's a primal thing, you know. And women do find it attractive. Like, I was watching Charles Bronson movie the other day, and I was like, wow, this guy looks like a catfish. But you know, he crushed ass, because some women do. He was just really masculine, you know. And then masculinity has a lot of power, but there is a lot of repression going on with regards to male masculinity, at least in these kinds of senses, you know, without this sort of cleaned up Taylor Lautner, you know, Channing Tatum hairless masculinity that we see a lot now.
Okay, here's another thought. Well, I can also ask about how, and this might be more for the women in the audience, or in the panel, how male sexuality has impacted them positively. Because this is something that it's often men don't get to hear, and it's a good thing for them to hear. And if you guys want to wait, I can, or you want to go forward?
I mean, my whole career is based on the fact that male sexuality exists, and it's a need that has to be met. So, I mean, I think a lot of the workers in the sex industry, and we share a lot of mutual respect back and forth between the clients, I guess, or the fans, and the adult industry and the sex industry, and the sex workers particularly, because on one hand, we get to enjoy our job and enjoy experiencing something with a person and get paid for it, while they can circumvent a lot of the drama and stress of conventional relationships, where they also end up, you know, paying for sex with money and with their time and with their emotions. And so there's a variety of ways in which the online sex and the porn community very much benefits from male sexuality, and we enjoy catering to it and providing appealing media for that male sexuality to consume. And so I think that's a very important, kind of a backbone of a lot of industries there.
Hannah, did you want to add anything to that?
I want to add a couple of things. The first thing is the things that we've mentioned so far. There's actually some themes in that are worth bringing up. What we mentioned involved male compassion, male nurturing, male creativity, and the fact that men are romantic. This is something that, the last one being something actually that male sexuality has helped me with. I'm really not a very romantic person. I'm a clod. I will bluntly say I am just an absolute clod when it comes to relationships. And it's part of it is that the things that are important to other people to receive from other people aren't necessarily important to me in the same way to receive from other people. And so I have a bad habit of not paying attention to them, and have gone so far in the past as to actually forget when it's my own birthday because of that, much less trying to remember everybody else's. And there have been a number of men in my life, not necessarily men I've been romantically involved in, but men who were romantic types, that their influence has helped me to grasp the importance of having a romantic nature and romanticizing aspects of human life. And it's a good way to explain it is, and this is, like I said, is come to me a lot from men who were not romantic partners. Their relationship to me was entirely different. My grandfather taught me about treasuring things that led to relationships, treasuring things that brought important things into your life or important circumstances into your life, by treasuring the story of how he and my grandmother got together, which is a particularly romantic story. And I'm not going to tell it because it's kind of long, but it took me a long time to grasp the importance of it, and I heard quite a bit of it from him, And he also taught me the importance of treating other people like they are on my mind more often than just, when I'm with them. And not just having other people on my mind, which I do, but actually communicating it to them. And these are things that they're aspects of male sexuality that women treat men like they don't do, even though men structure their entire lives around the fact that their loved ones are on their mind all the time. Their careers are about supporting their families. When it really boils down to it, every goal in a man's life is about supporting the people that he has made himself important to and made important to him. And it's not just a part of his sexuality, it's a part of his overall character. But that level of nurturing and that sort of, I put that in the category of romance because it is a level of dedication that I don't know if women match it. There are many ways in which women are similar to it. I mean, we do structure our lives around our children when we have children, but we don't structure our lives around providing for our husbands. We don't sacrifice everything. If we did, we wouldn't worry about things like work-life balance. We wouldn't worry about things like our physical appearance when we're 50. We would be more concerned with what can we do to ensure the welfare of our partners. And so it is a very romantic thing. And it is a very, I don't know, it's an aspect of masculinity and an aspect of male sexuality that I'm not sure that women can ever fully grasp. And it makes it very much not fair that women treat men like they're clods if they don't bring enough flowers on Valentine's Day after they spend their whole lives doing this. And it's a lesson that I picked up. I mean, I picked this up from my grandfather in that way. I picked it up from my father choosing to have 4 jobs so that my mom could focus more on my brother and me, and choosing to do work that he could teach to my brother and me, and choosing to give up rest and give up his health to mentor us. And the same thing that, like, my husband gave up his career potential to be where he could be there for his kids, for all of his kids. And these are aspects of masculinity that are part of male sexuality because they involve a man's dedication to his family, his loved ones. And it's not just fathers. I mean, my brothers, my uncles, my male friends, I've seen this in all of them, the way they bond with each other, the way they bond with their friends, the way they bond with siblings and cousins and extended family. This is what men are. and it is one of the most beautiful and remarkable things I've ever seen in the world. And I guess that's my thing, my aspect of male sexuality that has benefited me. It has helped me to grow as a person. Somebody in the chat mentioned, it helped me not to be a sociopath. It might be the case. My grandfather essentially taught me not to behave in a way that would get me diagnosed as autistic, which is not the same by any stretch of the imagination as sociopath. But he taught me how to identify with other people. And he did it by being a romantic person in a way that is I don't think people think of the aspects of romance that are not sex partner related. But that's basically what it was.
Going Hannah's point about romance, and that there's an expectation on Valentine's Day of, specifically Valentine's Day, of men to perform a specific routine and set of events, to which I kind of have taken to consider Valentine's Day as a dog and pony show, but for men, women, wives showing off what their husbands have, what kind of rings they've jumped through in order to perform on this day. So we obviously have expectations on men in that regard, and I guess they get paid with, or responded, or whatever the expression is, not to sound cynical, but they get paid with sexual intercourse, perhaps. That's kind of the idea, right? Bring her flowers and dinner, and she'll wear lingerie, and you'll have sex. So that's the one time a year it is somewhat socially acceptable for men to have sex. And sometimes not even that, because a lot of women will maintain that it needs to be only romance, and yet there is a profound lack of considering and catering to what is romantic for men. What does a man find romantic? So there's a tremendous aspect of male sexuality that has to do with romance and relationships that we're ignoring and not giving any attention to, and not trying to even give one single thing to them in the same way that we expect from them, specifically on Valentine's Day. But I did realize that a tremendous amount of, I guess to get personal, before the adult work, before any of that, when I was much younger, my grandfather was the most important person in my life when I was growing up, the only source of sort of warmth and love. And throughout my life, men have been the safe space, and men have been the people who are devoted and loyal and have camaraderie and have true bonding, where it is a safe space in a certain way. And yeah, sure, there's jokes and there's rough play, but it is all with the assumption of being friends and being brothers. And that sort of thing has also helped me. It's been the injection of that sort of maleness in my life that has helped me also be a lot more open towards humanity, and just in general more loving and more open, and not so manipulative and cynical, and in a variety of ways basically sociopathic, in a way that women tend to forge alliances and not have any kind of lasting loyalty. Something that kind of environment was just very, very toxic for me growing up, and it forced me to be very antisocial, very closed off, very distrustful of people, because I've had nothing but pretty much horrible interactions with women. And sure, I was teased by boys too when I was growing up. So in general, I was an awkward kid and had a lot of issues, a lot of self-esteem issues. And then it took a absolute, just saintly patient and loving and open and taking as many hits as could possibly a human being can bear person in order for me to be able to overcome a lot of my issues and to finally come out and be a kind and positive person who's motivated by love. But that's not who I was at all. And so it actually took another aspect of male sexuality, masculinity in general, that kind of stoic but loving and protective daddy figure thing, situation that really helped me find my own and helped me be everything that I never thought I could be. So I grew up very, very, with a lot of self-esteem issues anyway, that I thought I could not have half of the things that I'm doing right now. And the bravery and the passion and I guess the ability to value myself was given to me by incessant love from men, and men wanting me to feel like my best self. And so that's something I think that is very rarely represented. The tremendous role that fathers and male father figures and masculinity of camaraderie and like altruistic brotherhood. That's something that is not talked about all that often at all in the media, and any kind of gathering of male or maleness is reviled by the popular media currently. And I think it does a great disservice, not just to men who are not able to gather together anymore and have their time, but also to women who benefit tremendously from this experience of almost a better way of living, a way of being friends with people, and a way of having a tougher skin, and just being able to have fun and be resilient with the world, and just go out and take charge of the world and have fun with it. That's something that that kind of spirit is what I found uniquely in the male community, and it helped me a lot.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn. The way I grew up and what happened to me as a kid has always left me with a very, very, very uncomfortable relationship with my body. When I met my husband, I was basically trying to live as far apart from it as humanly possible. He was the one who really showed me that I could experience something other than discomfort, disgust, self-loathing in the context of my physical body. So he took someone who was, I really would have preferred not to have been physical at all. And he gave me a way of relating to my body that was positive. And in doing that, and to go to an aside, because this is sort of very deeply personal, but I would like to extend it outward a bit. Me and Karen on the most recent Ragening discussed a poem by Eve Ensler, who is of the Good Rape fame. She wrote the Vagina Monologues, in which a lesbian raped a 13-year-old girl, although later changed to 16, and the girl said that it was quote-unquote a good rape. But what was interesting I found about her monologue, and this was the TED Talks monologue to TED Talks, was that in all of her vagina worship, she never once actually talked about how her vagina brought her any kind of physical pleasure. Her entire body was either a machine to be used to a particular end or something that suffered. And I found that really telling, because that wouldn't be the story that I would tell at all, and that's because of my husband and what he gave me. And in the context of that, actually making me be able to enjoy my body and see it as something that I could inhabit and be part of. And in the process of doing that, I think he also gave me a way of getting out of my own head so that I could actually feel compassion for people other than myself. And part of that is becoming much more of a happy person, and being much more settled with yourself, that you can start to extend your compassion and your understanding to other people. And in particular, he helped me see how men were vulnerable and in need. And he gave me the fire to want to help. Because I can't really give back as much as he gave to me. But in a little way, I guess I can, by bringing attention to the issues that men face. Some of them he has also faced, and trying to help them in whatever way I can. And so I think that would be what I think male sexuality gave me, was really a way of seeing beyond myself and trying to make the world better. And yeah, there you go. There's not much more I can add to that. And I think maybe that's an element of that is part of bringing this all full circle, part of why I wanted to give voice to men who don't have a voice. And then as an extension of that, also to gamers who are being marginalized. I know this is full circle, but so it almost led to that moment in the parking lot where I realized that I could stand up for something beyond myself and stand up for people. and I could take on that role of not caring so much what happens to me, but caring what I can do to help others. And yeah, there you go, full circle, friends. If you didn't think it would all come together in the end, it did. Haha. All right.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Is this the end? Is there something?
We're all having a lot of trouble following you, Alison. You do this a lot.
You're having trouble following me.
No, I mean, we're having trouble saying something after something you've said.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant you needed me to explain.
No,
No.
we have no trouble at all following you.
I love you, Alison.
Aw, I love you too, Mike.
Would it be really bad if I do want to say something else?
No, it's not.
This
okay.
is that I noticed a few guys in the chat sort of mirroring. They were mentioning they had similar body dysphoria to what you were describing, and I was thinking about learning through something that my dad gave me. Now it's not particularly a lesson that he taught me specifically, but my dad taught me photography, and he started when I was a little kid with nature photography, and then on into sports photography and so on, and I ended up exploring photography on my own as an adult. That gave me like of course as a woman with heterosexual attraction, I'm going to have some appreciation for the male body. Photography expanded that, and it actually helped me understand that in all of its many aspects, from like the healthiest guy on earth to your average guy to even guys that are not particularly healthy, there is something beautiful about every male body. And I know that it is more normal for men to not feel that their bodies are acceptable or appropriate. It is more normal for men's bodies to be sort of trashed by society than it is for women's bodies to be trashed. In fact, it's unacceptable for women's bodies to be trashed by society, but we talk about men's bodies as a society as if there's something creepy or imposing about them. But the reality is, when we talk about curvy women, every curve on a man's body is beautiful and interesting. And the textures of your skin and the way your shoulders come off of the side of your neck and the slope of the shoulders, everything. It's all interesting. And it kind of makes me sad that people in general don't appreciate that form. If you look at artistic photography that includes male nudes, and there's an entirely different mood to it than there is to the mood of female nudes. I don't know how to explain it other than I don't know, it's not, the imposing isn't the right word, but there is, and I hate to be stereotypical, but there's a strength to the appearance of the male body that isn't there in the appearance of the female body, even when there's softness and even when it's not the stereotypical perfectly healthy body. So I don't know if it helps to hear that, but there is reason for people to appreciate the physical appearance of men's bodies. And Josh just mentioned in chat, they call our genitals junk, he says. I think that's one of the lousiest descriptors. It's like, this is useless, this is worthless, this is trash, we can just throw it away. When it like Allison was describing, just the mechanics, the complexity of the mechanics of them are fascinating. And I think I said this to somebody else the other day. Testicles do something that nothing on a woman's body ever does. They move when you breathe on them. You can't do that to anything on a woman's body and make it it's like
Nipples,
mystical
maybe.
and mysterious. Well, they don't really. I mean, the men's nipples will stand up and women's nipples will stand up, but they don't. Like, if you breathe
Undulate.
right on, they don't undulate. They don't clench up and draw in. They don't, it's a totally different thing. And a texture that looks like it should be rough, and then when you touch it, it's like velvet. And it's just an amazing thing, and the structure of the muscles on a man's body, just the hair, the way the hair grows, and everything about a man that's different from a woman is fascinating. And the idea that men's bodies are anything but fascinating and unique and beautiful, the idea is junk.
There you go. Alice,
Yeah.
let us have that.
Okay.
Let us have the balls.
I don't know if you guys want.
It's all we have.
Well, the other thing is that the way you relate to people is, or even animals, is different. And I don't mean that in like a sexual sense. It's just like, I mean, for example, I sent through an image or a link to a series of images of guys with cats. And there's this one picture where the cat is sitting on its haunches and extending its front paws out to greet the sun, and upwards, and his owner or her owner picks her up and puts her up, like, almost like the salute, up above his head. And it's just hilarious because he's treating the cat like a companion, like a pal. And you don't see women do that. There's an aspect of, I think, male psychology there. As you're saying, you're not treating the cat like a baby substitute. You're treating the cat like maybe a little other being that has its own I don't know, natureness that you interact with in a fun way, like friends. And then there's another image that I sent through of a guy with a stripper pole, and he's balanced on the stripper pole with his cat on the stripper pole as well, and they're rotating around the stripper pole. It is freaking hilarious. And it's another thing. It's like you even though the cats are supposedly substitutes for babies, you're treating them like little people that you have friendships with, and you do stuff with, you hang out with, and that's something. There's something there that's so charming, and it's something that I don't see with women. I'm not sure if women really are able to do that. I know that I've never seen it, but that quality of just being able to get into a little, like, a head of someone who isn't you, and just sort of see them as being this separate and interesting entity that you can have a friendship with, even if it's a cat or a dog or a human child. Women, like, they have mothers in particular seem to have this huge block. I apologize, Hannah, with this idea that their children are actually separate from them. I don't think men struggle with that as much. They can really get into the headspace of things that are smaller than them, and still recognize that they have a personality and an independence that needs to be respected. And it's unbelievable that you do it even with cats.
Yeah, that statement's not something to apologize for at all. I will admit to struggling with that myself. And because I'm aware of it, I do struggle with it. But a lot of women aren't aware that they do it. And women will treat their children as extensions of themselves instead of people who are growing and developing. And it can be very damaging when they do that. It can be hurtful when a mom ignores her child's dreams and hopes and wishes that are different from her own, and it can be very limiting, and it can be damaging to the mother as well, because when you treat someone else as an extension of yourself, you take on the negative aspects of that person's mistakes. And so then your child, who is developing and growing and doesn't know everything yet, has to be perfect or you're a failure. So it hurts the child, and the child is going to be the primary victim of this, and it hurts the mother. And it can also hurt the father in very, very significant ways. This comes out most obviously in divorce, but even women who stay loyal to their families for their entire lives make the mistake of cutting men out of child rearing because they are viewing their children as extensions of themselves instead of developing people who need mentored by both parents. So, and that goes right back into the value of masculinity. The importance of fathers to their children is documented. There are studies that show terrible damage when children and fathers are separated. There are not so many studies like that on children and their mothers because it doesn't happen as often, so it's not as easy to study. But children clearly need their parents. They need both parents, and they need to be considered separate entities who are growing and developing people. And it may be that the reason for the damage that children suffer when they are separated from their fathers is because fathers are differently abled in comparison to mothers when it comes to mentoring and nurturing their children. And I've got a great example of that from my own history. I think I've brought it up before, my running. When I would run, I looked awful. I looked like I was going to die. I looked so bad when I ran that there was actually one time I psyched out another runner by coming up behind her, sounding like I was going to die. And her coach was yelling at her because she stopped and turned around and watched me run past her. My mom couldn't watch my races. She couldn't watch me run. It was too hard for her to be there without yanking me out of the team because of how hard it was for me to do it. And my father was the one who encouraged me because he was able to see past the pain of watching your kid struggle to the value of your kid learning to overcome the challenge. And it's vital that kids have that. And they can't always get it from somebody who's going to treat them as an extension of herself.
Apparently it's also vital for cats to have that.
I think it's vital for every living creature. Nobody wants to be treated like they're not an individual, like they're only an extension. And everybody wants to be part of a community, but nobody wants that to be the only aspect of their existence. Nobody wants to be erased as an individual.
Yeah. I just find it hilarious. These guys are engaging in that kind of almost like a one-to-one relationship with their little feline companions. And like I said, I don't see that with women. And you're right, it's probably a manifestation of the paternal instinct. Our fathers nurture our individuality. For some fathers aren't very good at it, just like some mothers aren't very good at protecting us and making sure that we feel valued. But that seems to be a very strong instinct with men. And it came out in these adorable pictures of men and their cats. And I'm sure if I found pictures of men and dogs, I'd also see that too.
All right, good.
Yes.
Dog men are people too.
Well, yeah, they are people too, but for whatever reason, I just had a whole bunch of pictures of men with cats.
Well, you're a cat person.
Well, I don't mind dogs. I do prefer cats.
I'm a dog person, only because I'm really allergic to cats.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that does anybody else want to add to what they find beautiful about men and male sexuality?
Apparently, Anna Cherry likes lycanthropy in men.
Oh. My husband also likes lycanthropy.
It's a fetish, you know.
Not furries, so don't go tweeting Christina Hoff Sommers. You're just going to confuse her more. It's lycanthropy. It's different. But Doges are the win. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Well. All right. I think we're at the end here. So let's usher us out.
All right. If you like the show, please comment on what we're talking about.
Yep.
Tell
and
us.
Subscribe.
Huh?
Subscribe. Like, we could
Yeah.
also tell them to subscribe. That would be a good thing.
Subscribe, like, share, tweet it, Facebook it, Instagram it, fucking put it on your DeviantArt, whatever. Tumblr it if you
Show it to your cat
if you so dare. Yeah, show it to your cat or dog
or dog.
or bird.
Your dog won't understand it.
Yes.
Okay, or local postman.
Yeah.
Show it to your postman.
The cats will know exactly what you mean, but the dogs will be completely lost.
Uh-huh.
This is my master plan.
Yeah. So yes, find us, share us, let us grow together.
Yes.